BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Well, what can I say? It is now October, and as we approach Halloween, I said that we were going to be doing some more things about ghosts, the paranormal, hauntings, investigate, and see what we find, and let's have some discussions on the subject. In the photo, you'll see Patrick Henry, an individual who was very important to American history. And for me, this one begins back in 2019. I was driving through the town of Front Royal, Virginia, and I picked up a pamphlet from the visitor center that was talking all about Patrick Henry and his Red Hill estate. Red Hill gets its name from the red clay type of soil, and we actually have this name all over the area. I'm in West Virginia, but we still use the name up here. There's actually a Red Hill Road that is just about 400 meters away from where I live, so it's something that's used frequently. It definitely caught my attention because of a familiar place name, and as I was reading through this discussion on Patrick Henry, just in a little pamphlet, like a brochure that you would get, I found that there were cases of hauntings, paranormal experiences, ghost stories that were coming from Red Hill. So I knew that I wanted to talk about it at some point here on the channel. But as I began reading up on Patrick Henry and the connections that he has to ghost stories, the occult, and such, I found that there's a different estate called Scotchtown that was, owned by Patrick Henry and his wife Sarah. And this is really where the ghost stories of Patrick Henry take off, because I'm going over to a website now that is simply called Seeks Ghosts. And the full name of this is actually it's like a blog spot, seeksghosts.blogspot.com. And they begin with Patrick Henry's famous line, "Give me liberty or give me death." And it's always great when people expand upon these quotes. And they say, this quote here from Patrick Henry, "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." When Patrick Henry gave his most famous speech on March 23rd, 1775, he was still grief-stricken because his beloved wife Sarah had died the month before. Okay, so talking about Sarah Henry, the wife of Patrick Henry, what happened was, as I understand from just reading through some sources here, it was that she had given birth to 6 children, and after the birth of her 6th child, she began to experience some battles with either mental illness or some type of mental instability. Her mental state began to deteriorate. But Patrick and Sarah were childhood sweethearts. They had known each other most of their lives. So what happened was, she actually remained on the Scotchtown estate, not the Red Hill estate, but the Scotchtown estate. And there was even a secret stairway that Patrick would use to visit his wife from time to time, because he had known her nearly his entire life. He has a very strong bond with her. And after Sarah passed away, not only does Patrick give his famous speech about "give me liberty or give me death," but over the years after Sarah's passing, there are these reports of a woman seen wearing a white nightgown with long hair just at various places on the Scotchtown estate. And that is one example of a haunting that we can see that is somehow connected to the life of Patrick Henry, as well as to the general area of Virginia. Because as we go through some of these things, we'll find that there are many places in Virginia that are in the vicinity of properties that Patrick Henry would own and frequent that are connected to these ghost stories. Another one of them is the Red Hill estate, which would become more famous for some other things, because Red Hill is 26 miles from Appomattox, the end of the Civil War, the surrender between General Lee and General Grant. And what really they say about Red Hill is not the hauntings that we would see from Sarah Henry, if these are indeed taking place. What the reports there are is just they see Civil War soldiers all throughout the area of Virginia and West Virginia. We have a lot of cases of Civil War soldiers being seen in ghost form. And what I would say that the most famous one that I had near my home in West Virginia was, people would say that there would be these 2 Civil War soldiers that would come out at night and they would begin to fight like with sabers and such. Just on a certain night throughout the year, you could see the ghosts, and they would begin to get into some type of paranormal brawl. I never experienced this firsthand, and I have to tell you, I am somewhat skeptical of these things. But when I hear ghost stories, I always want to know what people are talking about and how they want to share their stories with other people. What really is going on? And it's about getting to the matter of the truth. But I would say, though, that we even have something else because another place near Patrick Henry's Scotchtown estate is called the Mills Home. And let's just jump over to an article from WTVR.com. This is Richmond 6 News, and this is the best article that I read about paranormal hauntings involving Patrick Henry and people that were connected to him. And this is going to talk about something a little bit different. So let's just have a read right here. Mystery has surrounded the historic Mills home on Scotchtown Road. As we said, Scotchtown was the estate where Sarah Henry died. Mills home on Scotchtown Road for decades, including tales of ghosts in the front room and in the kitchen. Reportedly, it was the overseer's home for Patrick Henry's vast Scotchtown estate, and it was just down the road. Overseer, of course, talking about the person overseeing the slaves. Almost 2 weeks ago, a Beaver Dam resident began a Facebook conversation exploring some of the 200-plus year history surrounding the old frame home off of Route 54 in western Hanover County. And then, just after midnight Tuesday morning, it nearly burned to the ground. Hanover firefighters were called to the tree-shrouded home at 12:33 a.m. Tuesday. Battalion Chief Jason Williams told WTVR News. It took firefighters roughly 4 hours to bring the blaze under control, mainly because water had to be trucked in to the hydrantless rural area. Hydrantless, that's a good word. And firefighters were called back to the residence at 3:25 p.m. when a passerby spotted smoke coming out of the burnt hulk. That's also some good phrasing, the burnt hulk. Some stubborn embers had rekindled. The house was willing to be raised. The sprawling two-story home with a straight metal roof had been empty for a quarter of a century. Farmer Buster Mills died of a stroke in 1989. He was born right there and wanted to live and die right there. Some relatives and longtime area residents say Buster, who was quite a talker, was known to experiment with the contents of a whiskey bottle and puff on Lucky Strikes and would tell them chilling tales of the ghost in the front room, a room he reportedly refused to enter because of haints. So even this article is going to go on to say here that there's going to be something else. You heard that, right? There is a fire that nearly burned this place to the ground, and this individual named Buster passed away from a stroke. The two major claims they're going to make in this article is, number one, that it's possible that the ghost started the fire, and number two, that it's possible that the ghost caused Buster to have his stroke. What can we say about this? What I would like to begin with is that this really crosses into some new territory. There is an enormous difference between saying that Sarah Henry passed away on this side of the property and that people are seeing this image, this phantom, this specter, this type of gray, hazy image of a woman wearing possibly a white nightgown who has her hair draped down. But that goes into a whole nother category once you begin to say that this paranormal entity, this spiritual entity, is being able to manipulate physical things in the earthly realm. Absolutely different criteria. First of all, we did an upload recently on this channel called Do You Believe in Ghosts? And I would love to hear what some of you guys have to say about that. I know we've been asking the question recently because it is October and Halloween is approaching. It's a good time to talk about this stuff, but always weigh in with your personal stories in the comment section. I would love to hear anything you have to say about it. If you are an absolute skeptic and you don't believe any of this stuff, please just write your explanations in the comment section below. I don't believe this, and here's why. I would also love to read all of those things as well. But the thing is, though, just seeing this image, right? Like when I was talking about that story of the Civil War fighters that is told from my part of West Virginia here, that's just seeing two figures, two spiritual entities, two paranormal entities, whatever you would like to call them, getting into some type of scrimmage. It doesn't mean that they are interfering with any type of paranormal activity or paranormal activity that can affect a person, paranormal activity that can start a fire. I don't know about you guys. I think there's an enormous difference between just seeing some blurry gray image of something that appears to be a woman versus somebody having a stroke, a fire being started. I think those things are drastically different. But let's continue on here with this Richmond News 6 article. There was no ghost in the house, question mark. It might be, someone said. I never saw one, but it's a good story. Buster never told her about any ghosts, but she will believe it if he told other people. But the house has a chilling and fascinating story. Reportedly, the core of it was built around 1790, but other people said that there is no evidence of that. The granddaughter of the individual who was involved with this was named Richard L. Mills. Actually, it's Richmond L. Mills, Richmond. Nice name to have in Virginia, Richmond, huh? Richmond L. Mills, who bought the 126-acre property, which included the house, a country store, and perhaps a few animals, for a little more than $1,100 in the early 1900s. He had the general store, the country store, and he was running across the roads in a Ford Model T. So that's something that is going back many years, but definitely not to the time of Patrick Henry. It appears to me that plenty of people have explored the old house before. I had stopped there many times in the dead of winter on my way home on my motorcycle to warm my hands on my engine and consider the silent, stately, old house that stood so far apart from everything else in that part of the country. Haunted or not, many of us Hanover County residents will remember this. Long after this lonely old house that seemed to have a life of its own was taken down, long after it is torn down, I suspect I'll still see it standing there. And that is the conclusion of this article. First and foremost, if you believe in ghosts, I would like to know, do you think that ghosts simply just exist and that, they're just not able to interfere with the material world? Or do you believe that ghosts or any type of paranormal spirit can cross the boundary and actually interfere with some things? Because there are a lot of allegations that they have in this article, causing a person to have a stroke or even starting a fire. I think that those things are quite different, but there are a lot of ghost stories that are surrounding the areas in Virginia about where this is talking about, also mentioning Randolph-Macon Academy, but I think that it's very valuable to hear some things about Patrick Henry and the world in which he lived. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to go over to occultworld.com. I believe this is a .com. Yes, it's Occult World with a hyphen in it, occult-world.com. And this is talking about Scotchtown. Scotchtown is a house in Virginia that was built by American Revolutionary War patriot Patrick Henry and is believed to be haunted by the ghost of his wife, Sarah. Patrick Henry made history with his rousing speech in Richmond, Virginia on March 23rd, March 23rd, 1777. When exactly did Washington cross the Delaware? In which he declared, "Give me liberty or give me death." Though Henry stands as a patriot who helped with the birth of this nation, his personal life was marred by tragedy, sorrow, and that was mostly centered on his wife, Sarah. Henry's personal misfortunes seem to have begun when he purchased Scotchtown in 1771. And ghostly phenomena have been reported in the main house since its restoration, but reports also precede the restoration. Patrick Henry's great-great-granddaughter was convinced that the house was haunted and she would not spend a night in it. Passerbys have seen lit candles in the windows when the house is dark. Also, the images of a person holding a lit candle. Motion detection alarms go off inexplicably. The eyes of a painting of Joseph Shelton seem to follow people as they move. Furniture is moved about, especially a cradle that belonged to the Patrick family that is kept downstairs. Involved to the Patrick family, I believe maybe they mean the Henry family. Much of the haunting activity centers around the basement where Sarah was confined, where she died. And as we mentioned, her mental state deteriorated, so they would keep her in the basement, and they had that secret staircase that Patrick Henry would use to go down and visit her. Paint will not adhere to the walls. This is another big thing that I really wanted to say about the haunting that was taking place here in Scotchtown, involving Patrick Henry and Sarah Henry. They say when they paint the walls, the paint will not stick to that. Also, people who have some familiarity with things like ghost hunters, looking into paranormal cases, is this something that is very frequent? Because this particular detail really stood out to me because I wasn't completely 100% pulled into the story. And then I heard that, I was like, wow, that is something that sounds a little bit different, that just the paint won't stick to the walls. And is this the traumatized soul of Sarah Henry that is just not able to stay at peace? Or is this something else going on? Is there a simpler natural explanation? If you have anything to say at all, please drop something in the comments section below. Visitors report sensations of an invisible presence. A tour group once heard shrill screaming in the basement. In the attic, sounds of chains can be heard dragging across the floor. And They have also been heard, and strange swarms of wasps and flies have collected on one window. I would like to ask another challenge question. Let's go through this paragraph again because I think there's some very important things here. Much of the haunting activity centers around the basement rooms where Sarah was confined when she died. Number 1, paint will not adhere to the walls. Number 2, visitors report sensations of an invisible presence. Number 3, a tour group once heard the shrill screaming in the basement. Number 4, in the attic, sounds of chains dragging across the floor have been heard. Number 5, strange swarms of wasps and flies have collected on one window. What do you make of those things? I mean, all of those things can deal with the natural world. So, do you think that these are typical things that people experience when they're dealing with paranormal activity and ghost hunting, and when they're trying to have some type of interaction with any sort of spiritual entity that can be deemed a ghost? And if you'd like to hear more about paranormal activity and spiritual activity, I'm going to include a link in the description box here to an upload on the peak time of paranormal activity, which is 3:33 in the morning. It's only about 8 minutes long. It was from our Occult Monday Friday segment that we used to do back in 2018. It's an old gray box recording, so I like to turn the closed captions on when I'm listening to those things. It really helps me follow along a lot more easily, but the best way you can support this channel is just by listening to some more content, never asking for any money. All you got to do is listen. If you like what you hear, you can share with your friends on social media. But most importantly, just have a listen. And once again, 3:33, the peak time of paranormal activity, available in the description box here. We have these things here about how the paint won't stick to the walls. I think that is the most fascinating one because it's something a little bit almost unique to the story. However, when we're looking at the way that this is arranged, in the attic, the sounds of chains can be heard dragging across the floor, or that the flies and the wasps congregate on a particular window, and that the visitors report the sensations of an invisible presence. If you don't believe in ghosts, what do you think any of these 5 things could be? If you do believe in ghosts, and you do think that ghosts are real, or that any type of paranormal spiritual energy is taking place, what it would be your explanations for this? Because, I definitely think that people do have a very big connection to this. And when we did our upload on the ghosts of Fox Hollow Farms, which is also available here on this channel if anybody would like to hear about it, talking about a place in Indiana where that's Fox Hollow Farms that has been haunted by the victims of the serial killer Herb Baumeister, the I-70 Strangler, there was an individual talking about how ghosts connect with people through memories and the subconscious, and that's what comes out. And like when people have this type of cold, chilling feeling, his claim is, and I don't even know his name, just some guy that I saw in a documentary, saying when you have this feeling of the invisible presence, that is the spiritual and paranormal energy that is coming first into your subconscious. Then as you get older, it collects on your memories, like your memories have these types of connections, and that this is the way that people experience paranormal and spiritual energy. I'm adding in a few words there and kind of stitching it all together, but that's more or less what he said, because you know how documentaries are, like this person's talking, then they interview somebody else, and then you just kind of stitch together one person's comments, and there are a few additives in there that I threw in myself. However, that is the general idea. But what I can say as well is Mary Adams, who lived at Scotchtown from 1933 to 1940 while a child, heard unusual noises frequently. Maybe somebody had gas. Once she had a group of people with her, and the group of children saw a woman in a long white flowing gown inside the house, and then the figure disappeared in front of them. Okay, what we can say about that is I always think that it's absolutely more fascinating when people are going to be talking about how that multiple people are experiencing the same thing. If you're just one person seeing something, hey, I saw somebody in a long white gown, they had this like long flowing hair, and they vanished in front of me. Number one, people could be making shit up, excuse me, but forgive my language, but like people can be saying things that aren't true. Number two is maybe this person isn't completely what they saw, but that adds to a level of verification when you have a group of people all seeing the same thing. And then how would you explain something like that? If you're skeptical about ghosts, how would you really explain that all of these people, like even if you have 5 or 6 children, they're all experiencing the same thing? Is this just the overactive imagination of a child, and people are just going along with this because they're kind of caught up in the hype of it? Is that what's going on? But I would like to say that this article concludes here. And once again, this is from occultworld.com, occult world with a hyphen in the middle. They recommend the book The Ghosts of Fredericksburg. If anybody is more into, wants to hear more about ghosts, they recommend The Ghosts of Fredericksburg by L.B. Taylor Jr., and that is available from Private Press, published 1991. So that's just another publication out there where they're getting some of their material. But if you look at this here, unusual noises heard frequently. Not gonna lie, I don't really find too much weight in that. But when you see that people are seeing this ghostly woman in a long white flowing gown inside the house, very frequently you're going to hear this. It's almost like Bigfoot, about how people all over the world see this very large primate with dark colored fur, maybe sometimes white fur with the albino Sasquatch and such. But they almost always see a similar image in the forest. But when you're dealing with ghosts and the paranormal, very frequently people tend to report seeing a woman with long hair that is flowing, as well as a woman in a nightgown or a dress of sorts. Do you ever notice any types of patterns, trends, and similarities along those lines? We even heard this story at the family reunions about how many people, in this one cabin would have this same dream of a woman with long dark hair and a white dress. I mean, even in our family, we talked about some of these things as well. So I think that's where we're going to have to leave it for now. I know we're asking more questions than providing answers, but I did say, though, I'm rather skeptical of these things, but I always like knowing what people have to say about it. So thank you for listening to our presentation on Patrick Henry and the Ghosts of Virginia. I know there's some jumbling around in here and a few misspoken words, but also, if you would like to hear more about the paranormal, please visit our upload on 333, the peak time of paranormal activity, available in the description box here. That's all for me now. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so. But most importantly, please drop some comments below so we can continue the discussion, and see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.